Happy June 10th Day, everybody. So, for those of you that don't exactly know what June 10th Day is, it's also known as Liberation Day, and it's a celebration throughout the black community that this is the day when slavery was officially abolished in the United States. And knowing the fact that these last couple of weeks, the whole Black Lives Matter movement has been really strong, and that we've been having a lot of George Floyd protests, today, celebration is definitely bigger than we have ever seen in past couple of years, and that the media has covered this day much more than we have ever seen in the past couple of years. And it just gets to a point where there's a lot of people are pushing this to be a national holiday, and that there are also some MLS clubs that are petitioning this to be a national holiday. So we shall see whether or not if that is going to be the case. But today, the video that I'm going to be doing is a recap of these classic MLS matches, and in this video, as part of this series, I'm going to look at the first ever New York Derby at Yankee Stadium. I was supposed to make this video yesterday as part of Throwback Thursday, but since yesterday I had a very nasty allergic symptoms, I couldn't really quite do it yesterday, and that I basically delayed it to today to do the recap of the first ever New York Derby at Yankee Stadium. Now, in terms of the starting 11, there are some names that you do recognize because this derby happened only 5 years ago, and there are still many of these MLS players are either playing with their current club or they have moved on to another MLS club. But for NYCFC, the starting goalkeeper was Josh Saunders. In defense, you have Chris Wingate, Jason Hernandez, RJ Allen, and Shea Fassi. Midfield, you have Andrew Jacobson, Mahidi Balachi, Mix Disaguru, Bradbury and Tommy McNamara to round off the midfield. And then going forward, you have the legendary striker David Villa leading the line for NYCFC in this second ever New York Derby and the first ever at Yankee Stadium. Now on the subs bench, you got Eric Johansson as the backup goalkeeper for NYCFC. Then on defense, you have Jeb Bravatsky and Quinn Watson-Sharip. Midfield, you have Javier Cali, Kawado Poku, Pablo Alvarez, and then going forward, you have Patrick Mullins on the bench, which a lot of people forget that Patrick Mullins actually used to play for NYCFC before he went on to play for Columbus, then Toronto, and now playing with Atlanta United. For the Red Bulls, for their starting 11, goalkeeper, obviously you got Luis Robles. In defense, you got Chris Duvall, Kamar Lawrence, Matt Miazga, and Ronald Zuper. Midfield, you got Bradley Wright Phillips, Dax McCarty, Felipe, Mike Gorilla, and Sasha Kleshin to round out that midfield. And then going forward, you have Beltran Aben as their striker for the Red Bulls. On the subs bench, you have Kyle Rinish as the backup goalkeeper for the Red Bulls. In defense, you got Connor Lay, Damian Pervenently, Dane Richards. Well, actually, Dane Richards is the start of the midfield role that I'm going to mention on the substitute bench for the Red Bulls, followed by Manolo Sanchez, Sal Zizou, and Sean Davis to round out the midfield on the bench for the Red Bulls. So the Red Bulls actually didn't start a four on the bench in this game. Now, in terms of the background information of this game, as I mentioned, this is the first ever New York Derby at Yankee Stadium. This game happened on June 28th, 2015, and the kickoff was 5 p.m. It was on ESPN. Attendance, 48,047 fans attended this game, which to this day is still the largest New York Derby that has ever attended. And the reason why there was that many people there is probably because there was a lot of hype surrounding that this was the first year that the New York Derby had happened, and that I think this is the only year when ever the New York Derby happened at Yankee Stadium that they actually opened all section of Yankee Stadium, including the third deck that usually is closed when there is an NYCFC game. And of course, the pitch, as expected, was mediocre at best. And I would even say that it was not only mediocre at best, but it was really poor at best. Like, there was a lot of player that was slipping on the field, which again, it's kind of expected when you decide to play at Yankee Stadium, and that, you know, the pitch is definitely going to be a huge issue, especially that the part of the pitch where they literally tried to lay some temporary grass on the mound, and that whenever that happens, it looks really ugly, but it wasn't just that area. That was one of the area where a lot of players slip. A lot of players slip on every single part of the pitch, and I'm not even gonna get into the fact that the other issue with the pitch is that it was a very tiny pitch, which I kind of already mentioned a lot of time whenever I talk about NYCFC game, where either the pitch is absolutely dreadful or the fact that the field is so narrow that players are not very happy with how narrow it is. Although, that being said, despite the fact that the field was very narrow, one of the things that I like about it is whenever this game happens at Yankee Stadium, be expected that there's going to be definitely some chippiness, because anytime when you decided to cramp all 22 players in such a narrow field like Yankee Stadium, you're going to expect a lot of heated kind of play from both teams, and there's going to be definitely a lot of chippiness as we saw in this first ever game. Oh, also, the other thing that I didn't mention in the background information, this is the second New York derby ever. The first was at Red Bull Arena, which the Red Bulls was able to beat NYCFC in the first ever New York derby by winning 2-1 in that game. Now, in the first half, as I mentioned, chippiness early from both teams, which is not a big surprise, as I mentioned, the fact that when you put 22 players on such a tiny field like that, you're going to get some chippiness. That is going to happen. But it was NYCFC that actually got the first goal in this game, and it came in the 6th minute from Tommy McNamara that he scored from Jacobson and Discaroo. And NYCFC looked like they were by far the better team, and in fact, they almost made it 2-0 literally after McNamara scored that goal, when Bellucci almost made it 2-0 in quick succession and just couldn't put away from short distance. And if that goal went in, boy, this game would have been a whole lot different than what I'm about to talk about, how this game really took a turn in the second half. But before that, as I mentioned, NYCFC were by far the better team. I think the announcer kind of mentioned the fact that the Red Bulls had trouble getting into Yankee Stadium, and they were actually an hour late of getting to the stadium, so maybe that actually played a little bit of factor of why they were just off to such a slow start in the game. And also the crowd was just absolutely rocking at that point. Like, it was an incredible atmosphere here in the early part of the game, but it gradually died down because the away team started to kind of dominate, and it was the Red Bulls fan who was sitting all the way up in the third deck that was making all the noise by the end of this game. Now, eventually, despite the fact that NYCFC were dominating early in the game, the Red Bulls did eventually started to kind of come back into the game and started to get some rhythm into the game, but not before Robles robbed Villa on a one-on-one opportunity in the 33rd minute, though the flag actually went up in that point, so even if Villa does put that goal away, it wouldn't have counted because it was offside. And that was really the best opportunity that Villa had in this game, because for majority part of the game, he wasn't really a big factor, and that that has to be credit to the Red Bulls defense that does a great job in terms of shutting him down and pretty much not making him as one of the standout player during this game. Now, again, things actually become end-to-end with both of these teams started to get their foot together in this derby, but also things once again began to be chippiness again, where the first 2 yellow card in this derby actually was given to Villa and Robles after both of them was exchanging words. But NYCFC did head to halftime with the advantage, but in the second half, this is when things completely turn a 180, and it was not in the favor of NYCFC. In the second half, and in the 47th minute, just 2 minutes coming out of the halftime break, BWP scores from Sasha Kleshton. What a volley that was from BWP to tie the game up at 1 apiece. And then 5 minutes later, Chris Duval scored his first ever goal in MLS from Abang and Gorilla. And just like that, in a span of 7 minutes in the second half, the Red Bulls, who were 1-0 down coming into the second half, are now 2-1 up. And that really changed the dynamic in this game, because after when the Red Bulls were up 2-1, they pretty much bossed this game, and NYCFC was really on the ropes after that. And then 3 minutes later, the Red Bulls could have easily made it 3-1 in this game. And I know the announcer have also mentioned the fact that the Red Bulls, throughout this season, they always have problem in terms of goal scoring, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that this was the first year when the Red Bulls are not going to have Thierry Henry and Tim Cahill leading the line for them, and that they also have not scored more than 2 goals in that season until in this game when they finally break that duck. But they could have easily break that duck earlier in the 55th minute when BWP, who went one-on-one with the goalkeeper, and somehow, in some way, he was denied by the post. Red Bulls, of course, all over NYCFC. And then BWP had another chance in the 64th minute, but this time it was denied by Sonder on a one-on-one opportunity, and that you knew eventually the signs is going to come where if the Red Bulls are going to continue to get the chances that they got in the second half, that third goal is going to happen. And it eventually did happen in the 73rd minute when another player that scored his first ever goal in MLS in Matt Miazga would be scoring in this one from Sasha Kljestan. And just like that, the Red Bulls were up 3-1 in this game. But to be fair, NYCFC, despite the fact that they were pretty much second best in the second half, they did had a big opportunity just a minute after Miazga scored that goal when Poku had a big chance to give NYCFC back into the game. But Luis Robles, as we've seen many times before, he always comes up with big save in big games, and this was an example of it, absolutely robbing Poku and the NYCFC chances to get back into the game and make it 3-2 in this one. Now, just 7 minutes later, Villa had a half opportunity that of course, his shot went wide, which is one of the rare opportunity that he got in this game. And then the Red Bulls had a chance to make it 4-1 when Sal Zizzo hits the post, and that, you know, for NYCFC, if they were not saved by the post in this game, yeah, this would be probably the worst loss in the New York Derby for NYCFC until what happened the very next year, as we know that the Red Bulls would eventually drop 7 goals, and a game that is known as the Red Wedding in the New York Derby happened between both of these teams, which I'm definitely going to have to do a recap of that video. So sorry, NYCFC fan, when you have that kind of big moment in a derby like that, I of course will always have to kind of do a little recap of that video. There was end-to-end action to end this derby. Both teams could have eventually get another goal before this derby was over, but in the end, the Red Bulls were able to walk out this derby with a 3-1 win as they grabbed their second win in this derby. And in terms of the shots in this game, the Red Bulls had 17 shots compared to 14 that NYCFC had. Both teams had 5 shots on goal. The Red Bulls had more shots off target with 8 compared to 5 that NYCFC had. Both teams had 4 shots that was blocked. Possession-wise, pretty even, but that's because in the first half, NYCFC had a lot of the possession, and that in the second half, it was the Red Bulls' turn to have a lot of the possession, and when that happens, that's why the possession-wise would eventually even out. And that, you could also say, in some way, it was kind of a tale of two halves with the way that NYCFC looked like they were by far the better team in the first half, and that in the second half, it was the Red Bulls by far the better team in that. And the only difference is, the Red Bulls, when they were dominating the game, were able to put the ball into the back of the net, and NYCFC weren't able to do that when they were controlling this game. But either way, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the recap of the first ever New York Derby at Yankee Stadium. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this game, and if you actually have attended this game, which I'm assuming for any Red Bulls or NYCFC fan that is watching, they probably might have attended this one, considering this was only like 5 years ago. Let me know in the comments below what was your favorite memory from that game. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.